Kids driving you crazy with attention-seeking behavior? Today, we help save your sanity. Welcome to Empowered Kids TV Village Talk. I am so excited to have you here. You're here because you know that every family has the potential to be great, and you're willing to push the boundaries of your mindset to create the family of your dreams. On today's Village Talk, I am excited because we have Erin Taylor. Erin is a coach, a mom, and an author of the Connection and Kindness book. Connection and Kindness, the key to changing the world through parenting. Her podcast, Powerful Parenting for Today's Kids, is enjoyed by parents around the world. Passionate about helping families and showing how we can move beyond simply surviving life tragedies to thriving because of them. You can learn so much from Erin and her coaching. So I'd like you to check out Erin's work at erin-taylor.com. Welcome to the podcast, Erin.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. It is a pleasure to be here.
All right, we're going to dive straight into our questions today. So our first question comes from Sharon, and Sharon writes, "My boy just turned 1. When we're out and he's not happy for some reason, he'll high-pitched scream, really loud screech that everyone turns around and stares. It's really embarrassing, and I tell him to be quiet. I've tried ignoring him too, but that's hard. It'll be if we're shopping or we're in a restaurant. He'll have his own food in his high chair. I'll give him something to play with in the pram if shopping. It's like a tantrum. How do I get him to stop? I don't want people thinking he's spoiled. It's really embarrassing. It's getting to the point where he does it whenever we're out in public, and sometimes I dread going out. I don't want to be one of those parents that just leave their kids to do whatever and raise spoiled, rotten kids. Can you help me?" Oh boy! What do you think of that one, Erin?
That's a good one. And the timing is actually perfect because recently I read a success story from a mom who handled a very similar situation with her little girl. So I'm excited to share that with you here because I think the message applies, or the solution is a great one for this case as well, for this mom. But before we go into that, what I would say to this mom first of all is the advice that my mother-in-law used to give to me when my kids were little, especially when I had my first child and he was going through something, because he was always the first one to go through it, and I would be stressed and worried and, oh, is this right, and I don't know how to handle this, and oh my goodness. And she would say, "This too shall pass." And so I think that is great advice to remember, because when we're going through something with our kids, no matter how old they are, no matter what the problem is, no matter how big or small it actually is, it feels like the end of the world and like we will never survive this thing. And with this mom, especially at age 1, they are in and out of phases so fast you practically blink and they're on to something else. So even though it might feel like the end of the world and it will never end, soon she'll be looking back at that and thinking, oh my gosh, remember when he used to do that?
For sure. It does zoom by very quickly. And I love that advice because sometimes you can feel like, especially when you feel all eyes are on you, like I'm the only one going through this, and this is bigger than everything else in my world. But that's really great advice if we can just remember, you know what, this is just for a moment and it will be beyond this very soon.
Yes. So the success story that I wanted to share with you I think that will help this mom as well. She had a little girl, and I think the girl was around like a young 2-year-old, but she had her out to lunch one day. And the little girl was making screeching noises like a pterodactyl, screeching, high-pitched, squealing noises. And so rather than the mom they were at a restaurant, so rather than the mom trying to shush her or getting triggered or yelling at her or something like that, she said, and she said it in a very quiet voice, she said, "Oh, honey, I love your bird sounds. but that is a bird. That sound is something that would be good for outside. Today, right now, we have to use our inside voices. So I wonder if you could show me what it sounds like when a cat is purring. And this little girl made some soft purring sounds, and then she said, okay, what kind of sound does a fish make when it swims through the water? You know, that kind of stumped her for a minute, and she kind of just made that kind of little fish swimming motion, but no sounds. And so she came up with a couple other soft sounding animals. And so she completely distracted her daughter from doing that screeching by giving her something else to focus on.
I love it.
And so, yeah, and so each time the girl made the appropriate sound or motion for a different animal, it gave the mom an opportunity to say, yes, that's exactly what a fish does, or yes, that's exactly what a cat sounds like. Great job. And so the girl never raised her voice again because she was completely distracted with what the mom came up with.
I love it because I think when we start pushing to say stop doing that, kids push back because now it's a game, right? Especially at 1, 2 years, it's a game now, it's on. And my voice sounds so nice to me in that high-pitched screech. But when you channel that energy into something else, it's still a game, but now it's an exciting game that feels more tolerable to adults as we try to get through day-to-day activity.
Absolutely. And I think that it also is a good exercise in setting healthy boundaries from a very young age. And this is something I find parents struggle with throughout the childhood years, and it gets even harder when they're teenagers. Because if you don't learn how to set healthy boundaries when they're little, then when they're really pushing you when they're teenagers, it becomes really hard. So for this mom, if she were to take this success story and try it with her child, what it's actually doing is, in a very gentle, very subtle way that the child would never even realize at age 1, she's setting down boundaries. Okay, well, we can't scream in a restaurant, so that boundary is there. We can't do that, so I have to enforce that boundary, or kind of, you know, set that boundary. At age 1, you're not enforcing it, you're just setting it. But now how can I do it in a creative way that just distracts my child onto something else?
And it's still light and fun. It feels fun even for the mom, yeah? I love that. There's a part of this that I wanted us to touch on as well. And it's the mom's response of how she feels in the moment that her child is screeching. And I wondered if you can probably touch on that. Really the feeling of being embarrassed, and feeling like she'll be viewed as someone who just leaves her kids to do whatever and she's raising a spoiled, rotten child. Can we touch on that a bit, Erin?
Absolutely. One of the things that I try to do now that my kids are a little bit older, they're 16, 13, and 11. So we're out of those early childhood years that are really challenging, in my opinion anyway. But whenever I see a parent in public struggling, I try with all my might to make eye contact with them and give them a compassionate, gentle look like, oh, I feel for you. I know where you are. We've all been there. It's okay. If I could convey all of that in a look, I try my best to do it, because anybody who's had a child has been in that embarrassing situation where your child is pulling their clothes off in the middle of a store or screaming or falling down on the ground with a tantrum. We've all had those experiences. And so in the moment, you can feel like you're the only one that this ever happened to. Your child is the worst behaved child on the planet. People are going to tell you you should put your child in a zoo because they act like an animal. You know, all these horrible things run through our minds because I think we come into it or we feel that other people have a certain expectation of how children will behave. But the common expectation of how children will behave and the reality of how little kids actually behave it couldn't be further apart.
That's true, yeah.
Kids will have tantrums. They will be overstimulated. They will get bored. They will cry. They will make too much noise. And in this case with this little boy, like you said, it is a game. It sounds like it's a game.
Yeah.
So it's not even coming from a place of he's overstimulated or he's tired or he's hungry or he's whatever. It's just coming from he's finding his voice, and his voice is fun. And so when a mom or a dad is feeling that pressure of the judgment of others, which certainly I'm not going to deny that some people may judge that situation and start having negative thoughts about the parent, but the parent has to be more concerned with what is right for her child and what her child needs in that moment than what the people at the table next to her must be thinking. Because
Absolutely.
those people, she'll never see them again.
Exactly.
So it doesn't matter what they think. It matters how she's showing up for her child in that moment.
Absolutely. And I love that. I think so much time we can get lost in our own heads, because we all have that inner critic as well, right? So our inner critic starts going, and then we start assuming what that person's going to think about me, what that person's, and it just spirals, and now we're in an anxious knot, still trying to deal with the situation before us, but without now our calm collective clarity that we really need to bring value to the situation. One of the things that I love to share for situations like this is an exercise of self-compassion. And for me, for me, one of the experts that I love to refer to for self-compassion is Kristin Neff. And within this episode, I'll also put a link to her, because she even has a story very similar to this, while on a plane and her son is just going off. And it really is about turning inward, turning that voice inward, and just saying, you know what, this is tough. This is really hard. And I feel embarrassed. And sometimes just saying those words to yourself, you can feel the calm kind of take over. And that leaves you in a better position to then deal with the situation. Yeah.
Fantastic. I love that.
So, sorry, Erin.
That's okay. I think also when we get triggered in that moment, like you said earlier, our clarity goes out the window, and our ability to think and figure out, we have to be creative and think on our feet as parents. And so that ability goes out the window when we're triggered and stressed, and our stress levels are up to here. And so giving yourself that bit of compassion, I know how hard this is. I know how embarrassing this is, but we'll figure out a way to get through this. I think it's a beautiful gift that parents can give themselves.
All right. So what we try to do is to make these episodes all about action. So I'm just going to try to go over the actions that we've offered for this parent. So the first thing is, remember, this too shall pass. They will grow up, you will look back, and you will laugh at these moments, remembering how stressed you got by them. So just hold that in your heart. This too shall pass. The second thing is to channel that energy in a fun and engaging way that helps the kid learn about setting boundaries. So maybe take that voice, and Erin, you gave a beautiful example of a strategy of just using that voice to mimic soft, quiet animals, showing that there's an indoor voice and an outdoor voice. There's a place to be loud, and then there's a place to be quiet. And really then add in some self-compassion, recognizing when you are triggered, and when, okay, now I've lost my cool because I'm feeling anxious and I'm feeling embarrassed, and applying some self-compassion so that you can get yourself back to a regulated state where you can then bring your clarity and your creativity, because as parents we've got to be creative, right? You bring your creativity to the situation. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that, Erin?
I think that pretty much covers it. When you talked about the child on the plane with Kristin, I thought about when my son was 18 months old and we took a trip to Italy. So we were on an 8-hour flight and it was a red eye. So I thought in my infinite parenting wisdom that we were taking off at 7 p.m. So we would barely be settled into the plane, taking off in this blissful way. And then my child would just naturally fall asleep because it was his bedtime. And angelically for the whole plane ride. And we would wake up, land, and go on about our day, having a delightful time. Not so much. He started crying, probably because of his ears, but he started crying as soon as we started taking off, and he wasn't a crying kind of baby. He cried for 8 straight hours. And we rocked him and we changed him and we fed him and we laid him on the floor and we laid him on the chair and we walked up and down the aisle and we took him to the bathroom. I mean, we did everything we could think of. And I just knew that all these people on this plane were probably like, oh, can you just parachute out of here? You're driving us crazy. And because I was a captive, I was held prisoner in the plane. I just kept thinking, okay, we've got 2 hours under our belt, only 6 hours left. We can do this. Okay, we're halfway there. Eventually he's gonna stop crying. These people are just gonna have to just deal with it because there's nothing else I can do. I mean, I felt like I was held prisoner. So I have the utmost compassion for parents who are trapped in that situation. It's hard.
It is hard, but I think that the self-compassion, as we mentioned before, does really go a long way, because when you're in a situation like that and there's nothing else you can do, it's really just to turn the love inwards. And I think what I loved about what Kristin shared from that story is that when she found her calm, her son did as well. And I think that's one that we can always take away. When we turn and we fill up with that compassion, our kids can feel the difference, the shift in our energy. And it really does help them get a bit self-regulated and then bring all our energy just back down to a calm level.
Absolutely.
So that's wonderful. Again, Erin, I want to thank you so much for joining us and for getting in on the conversation. And I want to remind everyone that they can visit your site and get more information about your work at erin-taylor.com. So thanks again, Erin, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. We're all about sharing and supporting this village. So if you found value in this episode, be sure to share it with your family and friends. And remember, this is a weekly show. So if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that bell icon so that you'll be notified of our next episode. As we always say in the village, you're just one connection away. With love and gratitude, empower us. Until next time.